The sun hadn't yet broken through the clouds when Joxmoran noticed the first alert from his perimeter sensors. A quiet ping echoed through the neural interface tucked behind his ear, followed by a pulsing red icon projected into his line of sight. Unauthorized entry Sector 4. Again, he exhaled sharply, setting down his multi-spanner and wiping sweat and biotech lubricant from his brow. Out here on the rim colonies of Tau Ceti Prime, things were supposed to be simple. You got your plot of land, you farmed your tech-grown crops, you kept to yourself. That was the arrangement. That was the dream. But apparently, not everyone respected borders the way they used to. Jox stood up from his crouched position near the root harvester and tapped into his surveillance system. Soft hum spread through the air as a drone disengaged from its charging port and zipped upward, camouflaged against the dusty pink sky. Within seconds, he had a visual feed. 2 women, platinum blonde with identical angular sunglasses and blinding white jackets, were stomping through his mycelium grain field like they owned the place. The Karen sisters. Again, they'd moved into the luxury housing enclave, just a kilometer down Regia, gated community built on the bones of the old mining base. Over time, a web of neatly paved private roads sprouted from the enclave like a fungal infection, but none of them were direct enough for the sisters' tastes. Instead, they had decided that the shortest route to the colony spa was straight through Jox's farm. Sensors and warning signs be damned. Jox had spoken to them twice already. First time he'd approached with patience, explaining that his crops were genetically tuned to respond to foot pressure, and human interference could cause mutations or worse. They laughed, sipping bubble coffee from glass flasks and pretending not to hear him. The second time, he'd been firmer. He'd triggered a localized flash boom to startle them. That earned him a colony infraction citation from some backwater community board who thought his use of defense tech was aggressive, and yet, here they were, again, marching across his land like it was some designer trail on a lifestyle app. The taller one, Marla, he thought, paused to adjust her neural feed and scoffed at a passing sensor pole. Is this like even up to code? It looks old. Jox needs to upgrade or relocate, her sister replied. Can't stand these crusty off-grid types. Jox's lip twitched. Crusty? Was it? He watched them from a small shed by the drone hub, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the wall. His farm wasn't just a patch of soilet, was an integrated biosystem, AI-regulated roots, nutrient-fed plasma stalks, gene-spliced mycelium that took years to cultivate. Every careless step the sisters took sent subtle ripples of stress through the ecosystem. To them, it was just a shortcut. To him, it was sabotage, but he didn't yell, not this time. He made a note. 2 more incidents, both at mid-morning. Same path, no deviation. Their behavior was patterned, predictable, predictability. He knew from his days in orbital logistics was an exploitable weakness. Jox closed the drone feed and walked back to the central control core beneath his greenhouse. The air inside was cool and humid, glowing with the soft pulses of his oxygenating crops. A field of data scrolled across the main display. Soil health, water flow, solar efficiency. He added a new script to the system. Observe, analyze, delay. A smart deterrent, not dangerous. Just inconvenient enough. He'd give them one more warning silently through the tech itself. A shifting of the field topology, a harmless misdirection. If they ignored that, well, he was a farmer. But he wasn't above a little engineering. Not anymore. The next day, Jox stood beneath the early light of Tau Ceti Prime's second sunrise, calibrating the swarm. 100 nanodrones hovered silently in the staging bay, their carbon fiber wings folded tight, optics glinting like insects ready to scatter. Each one was equipped with adaptive camouflage, local audio output, and micro-lidar plenty to monitor. Distract, and if necessary, deter. He wasn't out to hurt anyone. He didn't need to. The sisters were creatures of ego. All he had to do was outsmart the mand, make sure they knew it. By mid-morning, the sensor grid along the east quadrant pinged. Same time, same path. The Karen sisters had returned wearing matching solar reflective suits this time. and dragging some sort of rolling cosmetic case behind them through the middle of his kinetic seed rows. The elder one, Marlowe, was broadcasting live again, her voice amplified by a crystal-embedded mic near her collarbone. "See, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we need to petition for direct transit lines. These old techies are sitting on prime real estate and acting like they own the planet. It's literally dirt." Her sister Lonnie posed behind her, waving at the feed like they were on a glamour trek. Jock shook his head and tapped his wristband. The nanodrones took flight, silent as vapor.
Ow.
They fanned out above the farm in a thin, shifting cloud, invisible to unenhanced eyes. He watched through their vision, infrared, and motion analysis, mapping the sisters in shimmering outlines. He'd programmed the drones with 3 stages: passive observation, active warning, and sensory disruption. Stage 1 activated. The drones hovered ahead of the women and cast light distortions across the crops, shimmering illusions of shifting. Soil and blinking hazard markers that didn't physically exist. Marla stopped. "Wait, is your overlay glitching?" "No, that's in the actual field," Lonnie said, squinting. "It's like flickering." Stage 2. Jock sent a burst signal, and one of the drones swooped low, emitting a crisp, clear audio message through a synthetic voice. "Warning, you are trespassing on private agricultural property. Please redirect to public access routes. This unauthorized biological presence will be logged and reported." The sisters froze, startled. Lonnie immediately activated her comm. Is this legal? Can he do that?" "It's harassing us, Marla," he said, already tilting her feed to capture the drone as it hovered near the edge of their view. "Look at this. Militarized tech on farmland. This is what we're dealing with. I'm filing a grievance again." They turned back toward the direction they came from, visibly shaken but trying to play it off. Lonnie flipped off the drone, muttering about creepy loner farmers. As they exited the field, Yox deactivated the swarm and allowed the drones to return to standby. He'd logged everything: timestamps, its biometric readings, trespass coordinates. But what concerned him most wasn't the trespass itself. It was what he'd picked up in the feed metadata when the sisters broadcasted. Lonnie's stream had been piggybacking a Signalan encrypted handshake running on a narrowband protocol used mostly by surveyor, drones, and black market scanners. Jox furrowed his brow. Why would a pair of suburban influencers need encrypted uplinks? He pulled the signal logs and stored them for deeper analysis. The Karen sisters might have acted entitled and careless. But this was something else, something layered beneath the performance. Either they were fronting for someone, or they were hiding their true intent. Still, the warning had worked for now. But he knew they'd be back. That was how people like them operated. He pushed until something pushed back harder. Jox returned to his greenhouse, sat at the control core, and started sketching a new algorithm into the system, something stronger. Not harmful, but inconvenient, immovable. If they wanted to keep crossing lines, he'd make sure the next one they crossed had consequences. It was 3 days before they returned, and Jox had spent every hour of that window preparing the gravlock. Trap had taken years to conceptualize, back when he was designing terrain-secure equipment for deep space salvage missions. The principle was simple: an adaptive magnetic field that could sync with a vehicle's powertrain, disable its propulsion, and anchor it in place, using the planet's own gravitational rhythm. On paper, it had military applications. On a farm, it was overkill. But on his farm, it was the perfect deterrent. The final piece was buried under Sector 4A, just beneath the drought-resistant plasma harvest crops the sisters liked to stomp through. Jox concealed the gravlock plate beneath a patch of dry soil, in surface plant matter, and layered the camouflage net. Holoreactive mesh keyed to the wind and light shifts of the terrain. It looked like nothing more than ordinary farmland to the naked eye, and even to most spectrum lenses. It was waiting. So was he. The trespass alert came at 10:37 a.m., right on time. Jox was already watching the sky, chewing on a protein root, as the familiar soft chime echoed in his neural HUD. From his control room, he opened the aerial drone feed and zoomed in on the glittering silver speck approaching the property line. Sure enough, it was them. But this time, they were in a car. Not just any car, an Arian V-Class hover cruiser. The kind designed for low altitude, high comfort suburban drift. Solar polished, self-correcting, anti-scratch hull with built-in AI navigation. Retail price, more than the yearly output of most mid-tier farms. Really? Jocks muttered, watching as the cruiser tilted downward and began to descend toward his property like it was a common driveway. They weren't even walking anymore. The vehicle glided smoothly over the fence line, triggering zero response. From the passive sensors, it was programmed to mimic an agricultural drone's clearance signature. Clever, in a lazy kind of way. But not clever enough. Jax tapped the command on his control panel. As the cruiser hovered over the hidden trap zone, the gravlock activated. Soft hum grew into a throbbing pulse under the soil. For a second, nothing happened. Then the vehicle's lights flickered and its altitude wavered. The rear end dropped 6 inches. The front tried to compensate, failed, and the entire vehicle sagged awkwardly as its repulsors gave out completely. Inside the cab, panic exploded. The sisters' faces twisted in confusion as the dashboard lit up with error messages. Jocks zoomed in and activated the audio tap. "What is happening? Why aren't we moving?" Marla snapped. Lonnie was already slapping at the dashboard. "It says, ... propulsion lock. Magnetic interference detected. Who uses magnets anymore?" Jocks smiled to himself. The lock would hold until he released it tore. Until the vehicle's AI rebooted and tried to reroute its power source. Gox had already thought of that too. The trap was tuned to cycle frequency modulation, tricking the onboard systems into thinking it was still mid-flight. It would be hours before the cruiser even tried to override. Back on the feed, Lonnie was calling for help. Her connection lit up, but no one answered. Jax toggled the jamming protocol, a softband signal loop that redirected all outbound transmissions through a buffer AI on the sister's end. The call would appear to ring endlessly. On his, the AI calmly began cataloging the incident under rural land use dispute, documented intrusion. Marla climbed out of the hover cruiser and yelled toward the sky, "Hey, you Jocks! We know you did this. This is illegal." Jocks didn't respond. He didn't need to. The law was on his side, and the farm's boundaries had been clearly registered in the planetary zoning logs. They had chosen to cross them again, and now their vehicle wasn't going anywhere. The Karens had come onto his land for the last time, tomorrow. They'd learn what Karen protocol really meant. The sisters were livid. Marla paced in tight circles next to the immobilized hover cruiser, throwing glares at every drone that buzzed within 200 meters. Lonnie sat slouched on the passenger side, arms crossed, angrily jabbing at her neural feed with no success. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows over the crop fields, and the cruiser remained lodged in place, its engines worry uselessly, power systems refusing to engage. The vehicle's internal diagnostics continued to cycle. Locked in a phantom flight state the gravlock trap had tricked it into. They were for all intents and purposes stuck, and they were being watched. From the shade of a smart-paneled shed, Jocks monitored everything. He didn't feel smug, felt prepared. The trap had worked exactly as designed, but this was only the second phase of his new deterrent strategy. He didn't want a war. He wanted them to understand, wanted them to feel the inconvenience of their arrogance, something far outside the polished world of influencers and entitlement they'd built for themselves. He tapped into the drone, swarm, and activated the Karen protocol. It began with a soft activation chime that played through the cruiser's external speakers. The sisters froze, confused. A smooth, gender-neutral voice spoke through a localized audio projection. "Welcome to the Karen protocol. This automated conflict de-escalation system has been activated in response to repeated unauthorized incursions on private agri-zoned land. Please remain calm. You are not under arrest. You are under review." "What the hell is this?" Marla barked at the empty field. The voice continued. "In accordance with Tau Ceti Prime Civil Agreement Code 741.03.
Act.
Your actions have triggered a mandatory civic empathy simulation.
What?
Participation is required for vehicle release." Lonnie blinked. "Simulation? Is this a joke? Is this like an old training protocol or something?" I'm not participating in anything, Marla said, scanning the horizon. He's trying to humiliate us. Back inside his shed, Jocks selected a runtime scenario from his behavioral training archive, Suburban Encroachment and Consequences. Empathy Loop Alpha. It was originally developed for mining corp managers who routinely ignored safety boundaries on terraforming outposts. He'd retooled it for something simpler. Trespassing awareness. The cruiser's interior display blinked to life. Both sisters' neural feeds were hijacked with temporary, non-invasive overlays. In immersive playback, began first-person perspectives, showing how each of their past crossings had impacted the ecosystem. They saw distorted mycelium growth, crops reduced to waste, drone pathing thrown off course, resource loss, not in theory, but in quantified impact. Then came the perspective flip. They were put in the role of a solo farmer working dawn to dusk, maintaining life support systems, engineering food out of inhospitable dirt. Every careless footprint, every shortcut caused disruption. Not because they were villains, but because they didn't think it mattered. Jax let the simulation run for 12 minutes before deactivating the signal jammer. The cruiser chirped and rebooted. Propulsion came online. Marla exhaled hard. Finally, Lonnie's face was pale. I think I felt his anger. Like, actually felt it. Marla scoffed. It was just a program. Stupid. But even she was quieter now. They climbed into the cruiser and lifted off, the gravlock field disengaging once their digital acknowledgement of trespass logged into the system. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Jocks watched them vanish over the ridge, trailing a shimmer of ionized air behind them. He saved all logs, flagged the footage, and sent it to the local settlement network, not as a complaint, but as a case study, proof that when boundaries were ignored, justice didn't need to be violent. It just needed to be precise. He leaned back in his chair, satisfied for the moment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something still didn't add up. The Karen sisters weren't just crossing his land for convenience. They were looking for something. And now that they'd been stopped, they'd be back smarter, angrier, and more careful. Jocks would be ready. The next few days passed in a calm haze. The usual drone hum returned to the fields, and Jocks's crop stall, bioluminescent plasma stalks, and nutrient-rich mycelium beds thrived without interruption. Without the daily chaos of the Karen sisters trampling across delicate growth zones, the land felt alive again, balanced. The soil itself even seemed to breathe easier, as if grateful. Harvest season approached, and Jocks threw himself into the work. His bots moved with seamless precision, clipping, sorting, flash freezing, and vacuum packing the delicate biocrop materials for shipment to the orbital colonies. It was good work. Honest. The kind that reminded him why he left the corporate labs on Earth for this place. But even amid the rhythm of harvest, something gnawed at him. The sisters hadn't returned. No hover cruiser skimming over the ridge, no invasive live streams, no echoing complaints about weird tech vibes. Nothing. At first, Jocks was relieved, then curious, then suspicious. He sat down one evening beneath the shade of a solar awning, feeding harvest data into his ledger while his drone swarm ran passive surveillance over the property. He reviewed the simulation logs again, watching the Karen protocol playback from different angles. The expressions on their faces during the empathy loop hadn't been typical annoyance or rage. Lonnie had looked startled, genuinely unnerved, and Marla, for all her bravado, hadn't said a word once the protocol ended. She'd just stared out at the fields before taking off. Jocks checked the encrypted uplink logs again. The same narrowband signal he'd noticed earlier was still present. In the playback metadata, faint, but constant, like it had been scanning something. Not just piggybacking their live stream, he ran the signal through his old surveyor decryption toolset. After a few cycles, something emerged. A fragment of a spatial echo, subterranean, anomaly beneath the far edge of his eastern fields. A pocket of unregistered energy signatures, not part of his grid, too small to be a reactor, too stable to be a malfunction. He leaned forward. That area hadn't been disturbed for years. It had no value. or so he thought. Jax launched a ground drone to investigate. The machine burrowed deep beneath the crops, silent and methodical. After 2 hours of scanning, it found it. A long-buried structure, compact and alien in composition. A remnant of the failed terraforming experiments that predated the colony's formation. Government records insisted all test sites had been cleared. They'd missed one, and the Karen sisters had known suddenly. Their constant trespassing, the signal, the strange scans, they weren't random at all. They weren't just influencers looking for shortcuts or attention. They'd been trying to map the energy pocket, maybe even mark it for private salvage, or resell the coordinates. Off-world.jx stood slowly, skin crawling beneath his work shirt. They hadn't given up. They were regrouping. Sure enough, the next day, his notification stream lit up. A public broadcast from the local community board listed an official complaint against Jax Morin for technological intimidation and unauthorized detainment of civilian transport, filed by Marla and Lonnie Carolyn. But this time, something had changed. Public sentiment wasn't entirely on their side. The footage Jax had shared of the empathy protocol had gone viral. Comments flooded in. Other farmers, Ofger,